Welcome back to the Healthy Pot, everybody. It's your friend Nick, and today we are diving into a topic that doesn't get nearly enough attention when we talk about health. We're talking sex drive and pleasure. Let's talk about sex, baby. So my guest today is Rachael Goodman, psychotherapist, a sex and couples coach, life coach, and attachment coach, who believes two things that might surprise you. The first is, if you're not horny, you're not healthy. And the second is, pleasure is your responsibility. Yes, you heard that right. Today, we're going to unpack why libido is a powerful indicator of your overall health and how stress and lifestyle show up in the bedroom, and why waiting for your partner to give you pleasure might be the biggest mistake you're making. This is going to be fun, honest, eye-opening conversation. So buckle up and let's talk about health from a whole new angle. Rachael, I am so excited to have you here, and admittedly a little bit nervous too.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. Being nervous is normal, right? This is a conversation that requires a lot of vulnerability, and people do find it hard, right? I always find it amazing. We can talk about chores, we can talk about children, we can talk about health, we can talk about beauty, but we don't often actually sit down and pause to talk about sex and how important that is for our overall health and our relationships.
100%. And I love that bold statement that you made when we were kind of chatting about what this episode was going to be about. And it makes sense. If you're not horny, you're not healthy. So when you say that to the listeners, what do you mean by that?
Great question. So overall, right, we have to look at our health holistically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, off the cuff, I'd like to say that I'm not a doctor. So if there are biological reasons that are, hindering sex and sexuality, those have to be seen by a medical professional, okay? But we do look at health from a holistic perspective, which means the biological, the psychological, the social, the environment, and everything that affects our day-to-day. And so ultimately, if we're not horny, then we are not healthy, because our body should be functioning from every area possible. So
Absolutely.
Just with our weight and our mental health and, the amount of exercise that we do, we have to look at our hormones, and we have to look at our stress levels and our relationships and how that all interplays into our day-to-day. But ultimately, right, if we're not horny, we're not healthy, because that means we're not taking care of the needs that require us to have a healthy libido.
Absolutely. And so it's funny because I was doing a bit of research for this episode, and the World Health Organization actually says and considers sexual health as a barometer of overall health, which I love. And some of the key things that you talked about, so hormonal health, or even stress and cortisol levels, and some interesting facts around a lower libido can be an early red flag for cardiovascular disease, for diabetes, for hormone imbalance. It's kind of like a dashboard warning light for your health. It doesn't mean that you're broken, but maybe you should definitely explore why that warning light came on.
100%. I mean, we have to look at lifestyle as well. How often do we sit at our desks? How much are we moving? How much are we breathing, right? Breathing takes a whole new level when we talk about sexuality and making sure we're actually breathing into our genitals. And we'll get into that a bit later. But yes, I mean, it is a warning that if you are finding that your sexual desire capacity, even the hormones that you're feeling are low and not, taking place, and you're not feeling things, then that is a sign. But I also want to caution that, we are all brought up in a different world and different cultures, and what impacts our own barriers is something from a psychological perspective that we also need to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think what I shared with you was growing up, sex was a non-starter conversation in my home. It was never something talked about. Therefore, I think there was a lot of mystery and hiding, and probably shame that came along with that in my particular family. So everybody's upbringing is different. There are families that I know that are so open, and mine was, the door was completely sealed and shut. So everybody has a different experience. And something that I hear every single day from all of my patients is, I'm so stressed out. Their cortisol levels are through the roof. And how many times have I heard my patients say, I'm just so stressed out, I'm not in the mood. I'm just so stressed out, I can't even think about that. I don't even want to do anything. So it's like the stress hormone is the ultimate buzzkill when it's, coming to, intimacy or pleasure or, anything like that. So how do we manage our stressful lives, but at the same time, maintain that healthy relationship with our bodies, our partners, and everything?
Right. Great sex. That's it. Simple answer. Great sex with yourself or with your partner, whatever you choose. And the reality is that I want to address something. So thank you for being vulnerable enough to share your own personal story, because that takes courage. And you're right. There is a lot of shame, and you hit it right on the head there with that word shame, because there's so much shame around it. Right. And I also come to, the biggest thing that I hear in my practice is I'm broken, which you actually commented on, just now, to say, people come to you and they're like, I'm broken. The reality is you're not broken. We just need to reframe and reset. And we do that in a variety of ways. But that being said, right, it's important to realize that actually sex and sexuality and how you enjoy that can actually relieve a lot of stress. So when your clients and patients are coming in and they're saying, I'm so stressed, you know what? Have great sex. Let loose. Have fun. Take the pressure off. We live in such a world where there's so much, pressure on ourselves, and that, take it off.
Yeah.
Like, give yourself permission to have pleasure. Just give yourself permission to have pleasure and understand what that looks like. And before you can do that, right, you have to be responsible for that.
Yeah.
Right. Just you go to the gym to take care of your health, just like you have a regular doctor checkup to take care of, whatever is going on inside, right? Just like you go to see a therapist for your mental health, it's no different. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
And so it's important that you invest the time, just as you invest in everywhere else, invest the time in your sex and your sex life and your pleasure.
Right. And so what is a piece of advice when someone is either so stressed or, yes, the cortisol is high and low desire, it shouldn't be about shame, but what if it is? Sometimes it's about science and your body is talking to you, so you have to open your ears and listen and open your heart and listen. But, sometimes there's resistance to that action of just having great sex and just like letting go. What is the first piece of advice that you share with some of your clients, or the most important piece of advice, the easiest thing that, someone can just like dip a toe in?
Okay. So great question. And there's a two-part answer to that.
Okay.
So I love you asked that. The first thing that I talk to all my clients about is that our sex and sexuality and our pleasure and how we view it, there's two parts to it. One is the neck up, which means it's, cognitive, cerebral, how we look at things, how we have been looked at through the media, through our family, through our culture. What's our narrative? What's the lens that we see this through, right? What is our shame piece? What is our trauma, if there is? And obviously seeking, a therapist to work through that is super, super important. So that's the first part, neck up. The second part is neck down, right? The body. What emotions are you feeling? What are you suppressing if you do feel something, right? What are you hiding? What do you want to embrace and celebrate? And how can you do that? So I start off that all the time with my clients, that there's two parts to this, process when we work through, whether it be addiction, trauma, empowerment, kink, different types of relationships, whatever that may be, like different libidos, infidelity, whatever it looks like, okay, from a sexual perspective, we work from the neck up and then we work from the neck down. So the simple thing that somebody can do to truly dip their toes in is to become more aware of their body, okay? Because everything that we experience is an emotional and body reaction first, then our cognitive thought processes come in, okay? Right. So oftentimes we might feel something and then we kind of suppress it, or we're too busy, or like, not now, go away. Like you feel horny and you're like, go away. What are you doing? I don't have time for you, right? And so it's a matter of actually pausing and then taking a moment to breathe and accept that. And that's there's a lot in there from a tantric perspective, which is a whole other podcast show.
That'll be episode 2 with you.
Part 2. There's lots of part 2, part 3, part 4.
Yeah.
But that being said, is if somebody really just wants to dip their toes in and sort of pause and embrace for a moment, it's to really do some deep breathing all the way down to the genitals when they do feel something, and take a moment to be like, ooh, that actually feels nice. I'm okay with that, and embrace it.
Wow. I love that. That's really, really good advice. And I love this separation of cognitive versus, body, heart, soul, everything like that. I think bringing the two together is a really important place to be. And something you said, it's like, oh, we don't have time for that, or you're pushing it down, or you're pushing it away. Stopping and embracing that is something that's so very important. Like, we talk about these 5-minute moments to breathe when we're stressed. Well, what about these, mini moments if we're feeling passionate or sexual or whatever it is, to pause and accept that versus pushing it down? I love that
100%.
advice. I love that advice. So something that we also talk about quite a bit, and a lot of my patients are experiencing now, is perimenopause. And so there is this hormonal fluctuation. Everyone is like, oh my God, there's an estrogen storm. Estrogen's diving down, progesterone, even with men, testosterone can dip. Can you break down how the cycles kind of impact our libido, and how we can work with our bodies as our bodies are kind of going through this process?
Yes, and that's a great question. And first and foremost, I'm right in that age bracket of perimenopause. So, man, I understand that.
Yes.
Right? It's not a fun journey.
No.
And here's the thing, I don't want to dismiss men in this as well, because I work with a ton of men, and andropause is real. And for those who aren't familiar with andropause, it's basically menopause for men. And so there is a dip, hormonally, and then how that affects this, the psychological perspective from somebody, right? So for men and women, listen, our libido goes through seasons, okay? And that's just how it goes in terms of our life. And so it's a matter of recognizing when it is low and then taking action. Okay. So recognizing that, oh, well, I haven't had pleasure or intimacy with a partner, or by myself, right, for a while. And so maybe that's something that I do need to look into and take care of. And so the first step is to recognize it, right? To not it, to make it part of your health journey, to say sex and intimacy and making sure that I have pleasure, because pleasure is beautiful. At the end of the day, I just want to sidebar and say we're all primal creatures. Okay,
it's true.
We all live as human primal beings that are animalistic by nature, and so let's own that. Let's accept that we can, have fun and enjoy life and enjoy the pleasure of pleasure.
I love that.
So I think it's important to recognize when there is a dip. And that's not to say, again, that something else isn't going on. So, speaking to professionals, getting the attention that you need. And if it is a biological, situation, then that does need medical attention, and that can be worked through in various ways.
Of course.
Right. So, I work with clients who, have gone through fertility treatments and who've gone through breast cancer, and how do we reintegrate sex into the relationship? And then, a lot of women who go through perimenopause and the dryness and the aches and the lifestyle changes, and the sore breasts and the decrease in estrogen and desire and all that stuff, right? But if there's a will, there's a way. And so why do we have to just accept it and say, oh, well, that's age and stage? Well, I call bullshit. I call bullshit right out and say, no, it's not age and stage.
Right.
Let's work together to find a way to get that pleasure back.
And do you find that sometimes it's about body confidence? So, I deal with a lot of people who aren't as confident in their skin. They've gained weight, whether it's because of perimenopause, menopause, or another reason, having children, haven't lost the baby weight, whatever it is. And so their confidence is just shot. And so that really impacts how they feel about themselves, which then impacts their libido, their sex life, and their comfort. You talk about like letting go and letting loose. And one of the main problems that a lot of the people I chat with, they say, I'm not even confident to go shopping for new clothes, let alone have sex. So my question is, if someone is in this moment of a little bit of lack of confidence or not feeling as sexy as they may have in the past, or they're craving, to be in a different stage and they're working towards it actively, but they're still not confident. How do we bring that confidence into this pleasure area, into, their intimacy with their partners so that they don't lose that relationship? Because one of the impacts that I hear about so often is like, I don't feel sexy. I feel like I've gained weight. I feel not the best. And therefore I'm not being intimate with my partner. And therefore that's putting a strain on our relationship. And it's like this cyclical thing. So, what's the best advice to give someone who's kind of going through it in that way?
I love that. And I have to say that the, let's say, typical client that you're describing right now are some of my favorite to work with. And the reason is, and the reason I devised a program specifically for this,
I love
on
that.
how to empower women to tap into their sexuality. I have a systematic way of doing this, but what I love about this is you have to learn to flirt with yourself first before you can flirt with anybody else.
Ooh, I love that.
And so I work with my clients on how to do that. And what I love about it is, you're right, when body changes, self-confidence can dip, right? But we have to learn to love our body at all stages, right? Our bodies are beautiful, beautiful vessels that have carried us through so many lived journeys. And so why shame it? Why not embrace it at every stage? And so I work with so many women, primarily women in this category. I see a few men, but mainly women, in terms of empowering over, self-confidence and body. Men is a different story. That's another podcast. But
Totally.
This one in particular, for women, it's really about, again, taking responsibility and acceptance and working through barriers and working through those lived childhood experiences where you've been told that if you don't look a certain way, that you can't feel sexy, or you shouldn't be sexy, or there's a good girl image of what a good girl should look like. And working with women, I think it's important to recognize, yes, take responsibility, find confidence and beauty with where you're at today, with acceptance and empowerment. And that's what I love watching. I always say it's like, a client comes in like, a caterpillar, and then we work in this uncomfortable, yucky transition, and then they fly like a butterfly. And it is the most beautiful, heartwarming thing to see someone flirt with themselves every day.
I love that. Let's flirt with ourselves, guys. I think it's a great idea. And I think we all know like those moments where we're really feeling ourselves, whether it's like we have a night out, we're listening to music, we're getting ready, we're putting on our makeup, and like you picked out an outfit and you're like, yeah, I look good. So, those are the moments where you take that and maybe you can carry that through a little bit every single day. Before we kind of go on, I'm going to pause from a word from our sponsors and we'll be right back. All right. So we are back with Rachael, and I'm going to shift topics a little bit with a hot take that Rachael actually shared with me. We actually need to be taking ownership of our pleasure, and that's kind of probably the most radical form of self-care, taking ownership of your pleasure. So, you also say that pleasure is your responsibility. Why is that such a game changer for relationships?
I think depends on, how you grew up. You're often, based on religion, again, based on family situations, based on social media, based on, just lived frameworks that you've put into your subconscious, that you tell the same story every day to yourself, that, we're here to sort of receive pleasure and give pleasure to somebody else. And we don't often talk about making sure that you are showing up for yourself in that pleasure, and that it's
Mm.
okay to enjoy the process by yourself or with somebody else.
Mhm.
And so being responsible for it allows you to have ownership, autonomy and empowerment over, situations that you can feel really, really pleasurable in, and that you're not reliant on a partner for that. And, the reality is if you don't know your own pleasure, how can somebody else ever know it? And so,
Absolutely.
right. So being responsible, just as you're responsible for going to the gym, and you're responsible for eating healthy, and you're responsible for, showing up for work and showing up for your family. It's the same thing. You're responsible for your pleasure.
I love that. I think it's an interesting way to reframe, because I think, again, we go back to how we were raised, or the fact that particularly women, maybe there's a cultural bias of, giving pleasure to a man, or not necessarily ownership of that pleasure. But if we reframe our own pleasure as a form of self-care, is that an avenue for us to be able to kind of get into it a little bit more, right? Like, I'm not shy about going to the gym. I'm not shy about going to the spa. I'm not shy about, whatever supplements I might take, or a spa day that I might take for self-care. But why is that something I've held back on when it comes to self-care, right?
And I love that you're framing it in a way of self-care, because it
Mm.
is, right? The act of pleasure hits so many wonderful neurochemicals in our body that allows us to have relaxation and less stress and more happy hormones. And so it is self-care. It's just like going to the gym. It's just like going to the spa, right? It's just a different form of taking care of yourself. And I love that you framed it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different perspective, but I think, if we could get over some of the stigma behind it, and start to view it a little bit differently, I think maybe that can open people up to them taking that ownership of pleasure. And so why do you think so many people outsource their pleasure to their partner? And then kind of what happens when they do?
So great question. Unfortunately, that's such an individual,
Mm.
perspective. I work with so many different people that come from different backgrounds, religions, lived experiences, traumas, different situations. And
Mm.
so for whatever that individual is going through, that's the reason they outsource their pleasure. So I work with people on that individual, like sort of more customized basis, right?
Sure.
Understand their attachment and their level of, comfortability within this, their level of vulnerability, right? What has happened in past relationships. I often go back to the first time someone has had sex, and what was that like, right? And so that could be a reason for someone who has outsourced their pleasure.
Hmm.
So it's really very personal,
Mm.
as to why, but it's something that everyone can work on.
Right. I think, there's a big part of media culture, movies and rom-coms and Cinderella stories and fairy tales that, shape culturally what our perspective is supposed to be, right? Like the male in a fairy tale is supposed to, be the suitor for the princess, or, every love story, the man rushes after the woman in, Under the Rain. And like, there are all these vivid images of
Right.
culturally what we're supposed to expect. And that is not us as women taking ownership of our pleasure. It's more someone, sweeping us off our feet. And I think even now there's this hyper sexualized culture, and the meeting of all of these things that are running through our minds. And even as I raise a young teenage daughter, I want her to ensure that she kind of isn't shamed and doesn't have these expectations. What is your best advice for, like, taking in all of that stuff from the media, but then sifting through it and finding your place within it?
Okay, great question. And just I giggled because you're right. Every great love story has a rainy season. I don't under
Oh
like a
yeah.
rainy like
It's
like
the
there's
moment in
always
the
rain
rain,
and
whatever it
kissing and
is.
something. Every great love story has that. Okay.
Yeah.
So great question. It's interesting because in movies and social media and everywhere we kind of look, you're told to be a good girl and don't show yourself. And I'm also raising a teenage daughter, for the record, so it is right a different time.
Yeah.
And you're told not to show yourself. You get yourself in trouble, right? Don't be too sexy. Be somewhat sexy. Oh, put yourself out there. There's so many mixed messages, right?
Yes.
And then they turn 18 and it's like, go have sex. Okay,
Ah.
I put 18 in there, but let's be clear, I just threw in a number. But whenever you're ready, okay? But there is a different, then it's like, okay, now go sell yourself and go have sex. And so there's so many mixed messages that these young girls are getting. And the best way that I think to help have healthy relationships and healthy perspectives is to normalize healthy, right? And to normalize, again, it's your responsibility, and
Right.
there's no shame in that, right? To have open conversations about masturbation, about intimacy, that there's an emotional intimacy that also comes with the sexual intimacy, right? I don't want to take away that there's no emotional intimacy, right? With all of this that happens, because we all know that emotional intimacy is really, really powerful, okay? And
Yeah.
that can lead to a different type of sexual pleasure, right? Let's also be clear that there's different types of sexual pleasure, right? There's kinky sex, there's lovemaking, there's hot and steamy like quickies, right? There's varying degrees of sexual encounters,
Right.
and so I normalizing, right, that what you see in pornography is not always the case. What you see in romantic movies is not always the case, right? They have to develop their own sense of sexuality and what is right for them. And I think that just comes with normalizing the conversation and making it a very comfortable piece of topic, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I wonder what your perspective is on some of these shows like Love Island or any of these reality shows where there are women that are very overtly taking ownership of their own pleasure. And, in the same scene, like one woman can kiss 7 guys at the same time, or, whatever the case may be when they're, doing these games or whatever it is that they're into on these shows. And we're addicted to these shows. And
Right.
what do you make of this hyper sexualized moment where everyone is like obsessed with these shows and obsessed with these relationships, but at the same time, they're not necessarily taking ownership of their own pleasure? Like there's
Oh,
this
wow.
dichotomy.
That's a loaded question, but it's
Yeah.
a great question. So, I think I have to come at it with a very non-judgmental lens on that one. I think that you're right to say everything that you did, and I validate that. I also try to have a very non-judgmental perspective because, again, I don't know people's lived experiences and I don't know what they've gone through and their attachment styles and why they're doing what they're doing. But these shows do place a heavy perspective on sexuality and being sexualized. And I think there's a difference there. So I think we have to look at the difference between being sexualized and sexuality. And what are you using your sexuality for? Is it for pleasure for yourself? Are you taking ownership over it? Or is it to, get a guy or
Right.
get a girl
Right.
or, get a partner? Okay. And so I think when you are exposed to these, sensationalized platforms, it's important that you have honest conversations with your children to recognize that it's likely not the norm and that these are exaggerated perspectives of sexuality.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just, such an interesting time because there's this dichotomy of perspectives. One is, overtly sexual and owning your pleasure. And whether it's a man or a woman, I think there's real empowerment to that. But then there's this other area of like, hiding, being a good girl, not owning that pleasure. Pleasure is for a man, and all those kind of almost historical things that are ingrained in us. And sometimes I think that there's like a bit of internal fight on that, and people just kind of have to work through it. So before we kind of have some practical takeaways and work through things, we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. Okay. So we are back, and something I always like to do on these podcasts is to really talk about practical takeaways. I think a lot of the things that we've talked about, I can hear and see women saying, yeah, like I want to take ownership and responsibility for my own pleasure. Or maybe it's the realization of like, oh my God, I'm not horny. Oh my gosh, I need to look into that and understand, is it stress? Is it confidence? Is it a health marker? How do I look into that? So for someone listening right now and thinking, oh my God, that's me, I've lost my spark. What is one of the very first steps that they can take to kind of reignite that spark?
It's a great question. Again, I would suggest really trying to understand your lens on it.
Mm,
That's the first step, because if you don't understand your lens or your why or where it comes from, it's very hard to just change it and do it,
mm,
right? And work through, different avenues of becoming more confident and flirting with yourself and owning, you know, an acceptance where you're at. And I
mm,
think that that is a very key piece, is to truly understand why you're in the place you're in right now, and
mm.
then work towards changing that.
I like that. That's really good. So can you give us one pleasure homework assignment that listeners can kind of try this week or whenever they're looking to try?
I got so many. Okay,
Okay,
just
we can do a
one.
few. You could do top three. Top three.
Top three. No, they would need a lot of instruction. Okay, so I guess the biggest one, and I kind of touched on that, is breathing. Okay, so when we breathe, we send a lot of oxygen to all parts of our body, and we know that, for meditation and mindfulness, breathing is a huge component. It's the same for sexuality. Okay, I would say when when you're doing pleasure next, just really try to focus a bit more on your breathing and getting it down into the genitals. And
Mm,
even if you're sitting in a chair and you're just like, okay, close your eyes, do some deep breathing, see if you can feel it in your genitals, see if it wakes up, right? If you send oxygen and love down to your genitals, it should sort of start to trigger something.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So
a really good piece of
keep
advice.
breathing, some
Keep
tantric deep
breathing.
breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Make sure it goes all the way down to the genitals, and just try to understand what your body's telling you.
I love that because I always talk about listening to your body. I talk about it more about like hunger sensations versus emotional hunger sensations, but this is another really good way to listen to your body. And if there is something that is kind of been asleep for a while, let's reawaken that. So I love that piece of advice. So let's do a bit of a game of overrated, underrated bedroom edition. So I'm going to
Okay.
throw out some terms and then maybe you'll tell me what you think, overrated, underrated, and maybe why.
Okay.
So overrated or underrated, scheduling sex.
Oh, underrated. You should. 100%. Just as you schedule going to the gym, we've said that before.
Yep.
Just as you schedule, maybe meal prep or children activities. Okay. It's really important to schedule it. Now, that doesn't mean it always has to be scheduled. Spontaneous pleasure for yourself or spontaneous pleasure with a partner is super fun, super important,
Mhm.
and keeps the spice alive. But that doesn't mean that you can't really enjoy and look forward to scheduled intimacy time.
I like that. Yeah, makes sense. So lingerie, overrated, underrated?
I think it depends on the person, but I think it can be underrated sometimes. I think people often think, okay, lingerie can be just like one lacy bra or, one, pretty panty. There's a plethora of fun, undercover your clothes, feeling sexy lingerie that you can go and try and have fun. And I often say to my clients, just go buy one thing. One
Mm,
thing, never ever think of buying, whether it has a chain, whether it has some lace, whether it's a one piece, just buy one thing that you're a bit embarrassed to wear. Wear it under your clothes for one day and
Mm.
see how you feel.
And what do people say when they do wear it for one day? What's
They
like
love it.
they love it. Like, this is
They're
amazing.
like, I think you just made me spend more money on my credit card.
I love that. So is that just lingerie, or my next one for overrated, underrated was toys?
Okay, I also think underrated. I'm seeing a theme here.
Mm.
Toys don't have to be scary, and they don't have to be overwhelming. They can be fun, and they can be a great addition. They don't always have to be in play, right? And it's an exploratory exercise. So I often make sure that couples have good communication, and make sure that you discuss what you might want to explore and a safe word in case you're not really enjoying it, and how to communicate properly through that.
Got it. Is there, so I feel like a lot of these are, underrated. Is there something that you could think of that's like overrated, like I'm over it, that's so done, or not even worth spending time on?
Nope.
I love that. I love it. The other ones I had were like
Because
foreplay, morning sex, talking about fun fantasies, but I feel like all underrated. Just
all underrated.
keep
The
doing it.
reality is communication is key in here, and you should always be communicating with yourself. You should always be communicating with your partner, and that is a really, really key piece. It's all underrated because our sex and sexuality and how we receive and give pleasure both to ourselves and to someone else should always be fun and exploratory. And there's no wrong way.
I love that. I love that. And so for the people that, do come to me that lack confidence, that maybe it's been a while and they're kind of looking to revisit that part of themselves and also open up a conversation with their significant other, what is some advice that you could give to someone who may have been, locked on that part of their life or not really open to anything for a long time? And how do they kind of like reopen the door if they're a little bit more reserved?
So I have a 90-day challenge that I give my clients for this specific reason. And it starts small because if we haven't really been connected to our partner in a long time, it takes time, right? You didn't get there overnight. You're not changing it overnight.
Right.
And so it requires patience. Okay. And so I have a 90-day challenge, which starts with, little moments, right? Little tender moments that create that emotional intimacy, that connection or that reconnection, and then builds up into bigger pieces.
I love that piece of advice because, again, if there is someone that I'm working with that has lost a lot of confidence while they're on a betterment journey, there's an opportunity to kind of reignite all different parts of their life. And I always say, weight loss or wellness it's one part when they're trying to lose weight, but it impacts every single part of their life, right? So this is such an important message to say, it's not just about body confidence, it's about reigniting something inside and also potentially relationships with their partners.
Oh,
love it.
Honest to God, people come back to me all the time. They're like, we're so connected. We haven't been like this in 10, 20 years. And,
I love that.
It's amazing to see, right? That part of your special, if you're with a significant other, if you're single, it's a different story, and then you can reconnect with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, which is super important. But if you're in a partnership, right, it's beautiful to have that one person. If you're in a monogamous relationship, if you're not in a monogamous relationship, which I also work with, is a different story. But if you're in a monogamous relationship, then it's beautiful to have that one person that you can share those intimate moments with.
Love that. Love that. Okay, so let's go into some fact or fiction and maybe bust some myths. So the following statements, let us know if you know if they're fact or fiction. So men think about sex every 7 seconds.
No, fiction.
No, fiction.
So again, like women, men go through seasons, right? Stress comes in, children, family pressures, and hormones. And so There are stages, right, where men do think about sex a lot, but also, if they're thinking about sex so much, what is it saying about like what's going on for themselves? Is that an
Right.
attachment? Is that something else that's happening? Right? Are they disconnected? Are they missing? Are they needing more attention? So no, men don't. That's fiction. And then men do go through seasons. So there could be times when they do.
That's so interesting. I actually thought that one was like, yep, spot on, but it is so much deeper than that. I think I know the answer to this one because we did talk about it, but low libido is just a part of aging.
Fiction. Ah, man, no, it doesn't have to be. Yes, there are hormonal shifts where things will dip, and you work just as you work with everything else that we talked about, right? To bring that libido back up. I have worked with women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s who are having the best sex of their life. And
Yes.
yes, and they're just like, holy shit. I thought it was done and never again. And that was a part of me that was lost.
Oh,
And they are just seeking pleasure left, right, and center, which is beautiful.
it is. I love that. I love that. So the next one is good sex should always be spontaneous.
Nope. Again, back to one of your questions earlier
Yep.
about scheduling. It doesn't always have to be spontaneous. Can it be fun and exciting and awesome? Yep. But does it have to be that way? No.
Nope. And the last one, I'd love to, dig into this one. If you love each other, sex will be easy.
No.
It's not easy.
Love and sex are different. They're different, compartments in a relationship. Now, do you want to have sex with someone you love? Sure. Do you love having sex with someone that, you want to be with? Sure. There's all these different components and they do cross over. Okay. But it's not easy, right? We're all unique individuals and the way we like to receive pleasure and give pleasure is different. And so the way we try to work through that not easy perspective is communication and making sure that you're talking, right? Making sure that you're sharing. And so it's not always easy, right? And then of course, as people's, social batteries and energy levels are always at different levels. And so some want it more than others and libidos can change and seasons can come in and, we all go through different lifestyle shifts. And so libidos are always changing. And so it's not always easy. It's work.
It's work.
It's work. Just like a relationship is work.
And I think communication is so important, but I also think that, again, societal norms or what we think are norms kind of prevent us from potentially having those open conversations about what you need or what your partner needs or where you're satisfied or they're satisfied. So is there a particular cadence where people should be kind of like checking in with each other? Or is there a recommendation that you might have for couples who, are going through seasons, who are like, I'm going through a season, you're going through the season, let's talk about it? Similar to, what people are talking about, like renewing marriage contracts and like what you need in this phase of a marriage or that phase of a relationship. I think there should be a conversation about intimacy as well. What's kind of your take on that?
You said it perfectly. I think it's the communication, checking in with each other when you're feeling disconnected to bring it up, right? There should be no shame around talking about it. Like I said in the beginning, you talk about children, you talk about chores, you talk about work, you talk about finances. This should be another piece of your relationship conversation and with yourself too, right? I don't want to only focus necessarily on people who are just in relationships. It's about people who are single too, to like have conversation with themselves. Like shit, like I haven't really, felt pleasure in a long time. And so what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how can I work towards fixing that?
Oh my gosh, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take one last quick break and then we'll be back with some hot seat reflections.
Okay.
Okay, Rachel, we're putting you in the hot seat and maybe you can give kind of like some reflections on the following. So what's one word to describe great sex?
Ooh, oh, there's so many. Sensual, surrender,
Surrender.
uh, mutual, great sex. It's ownership. There's so
Mm,
many great words. Uh, I think surrender is probably
I
one of
like
them,
that
to
one.
surrender and let go.
Yeah.
I think surrender and let go for yourself with your partner and enjoy the moment,
Yeah.
and is probably really great intimacy,
That's
whatever
great
that looks
advice.
like, because it doesn't always have to be sex. I want to
Right.
clarify this for a second. Intimacy and sexual eroticness doesn't necessarily always have to have intercourse or sex. It can be a variety of different initiatives
Hmm.
that take place. But I think if you can surrender and let go, you can be really present and lean into your own body.
I love that. I think, particularly for women, the list of things in the brain does not stop. Like it's
Correct.
funny when there are these funny memes or whatever on Instagram where it's like, you know, husband, you know, a wife asks a
Yeah.
husband, you know, what's wrong? And he says nothing. And like, he actually means nothing. It's like, there's nothing going on up there. Like literally there are no lists. And then a husband asks a wife, you know, what's wrong? Or what are you thinking? And she'll say nothing. But in reality, it's like, here are the
So
42 things that I actively have thinking about right now, like the
I
kids,
often
health,
say
the
men,
appointments, the football,
right,
the whatever. So I feel
right.
like kind of the same way in intimacy, it's like I feel as though, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think men are in the moment more than women. And women sometimes have that list of like, okay, I got to make dinner, then I got to take the kids here, da-da-da, da-da, like a million different things. And you can't surrender and be in the moment.
Correct. So I always joke with my clients that men are really good at compartmentalizing. So
Yes.
they have a box for everything, right? A box
Yes.
for work, they close it. They have a box for family, they close it. They have a box for sex, they close it, right?
Yeah.
Where women are a ball of yarn and it's
Oh,
all intertwined. So I have to go to the grocery store, I have to get dinner, I have to get to the gym, and oh shit, I have to have sex. Oh, then I got to go over there and I got to, do my work, or if they, and I got to do carpool and I got to do kid activity. So they're always constantly thinking. So they're just ball of yarn, where
yeah.
men are these compartments, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, if women more so than men, but also men, right? Just learn to surrender, let go, and enjoy the moment. Be mindful.
I like that. Mindful sex. It's a whole new thing. All right. What is the biggest libido killer?
Oh, the biggest libido killer. So different for everyone. I've heard everything. I don't have a specific word for that. Um, at the end of the day, I don't have one for that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think everyone's so different, and questioning your why is that a
Mm.
killer for you is probably the word why.
Why? Okay, cool. So what is the most surprising thing clients confess?
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Ethically, I can't share, but this is what I will say is I have heard everything under the sun. Like literally, there isn't anything in the sex world that I haven't heard. Okay. And I come from a place of no judgment because I believe in creating a safe space for all my clients to share, and I hold no judgment.
Mm.
We just work through whatever they need to work through.
Love it. Love it.
The one thing that I will say is consistent, which you actually mentioned earlier, is a lot of people do come with the sentiment of, I'm broken.
Mm.
And I think that is a really heavy sentiment to walk around with. And so recognizing, and I stand tall on this, you're not broken. You never were broken. And it's a matter of working through that to, again, reset and reframe and empower yourself to own your own pleasure.
I like that. I think it's, you know, there are so many things that we're unlocking when it comes to mental health, for example, like when we feel like we're suffering with anxiety or depression or whatever mental health ailment, we're now more willing to be open and to seek help rather than just feeling broken inside. And I think that's, you know, novel. But what I don't hear about often is doing something about feeling broken about being passionate or intimate or a sexual being anymore, right? Like if some people just sit with that for years and years. And I think I love your message of like, you're not broken. Let's just find the way that we can fix it to help you feel different and whole and responsible for your own pleasure again, kind of thing, versus just like locking that door forever. Love that.
Yeah. Don't lock that door.
So
there's so much pleasure
yes,
for your entire life that, you have one life and you're a
YOLO.
primal creature. Lean into it. Lean into it.
Lean into it. I love that. And so last kind of question is, what is one question everyone should ask their partner but rarely does?
So I do a great exercise with my clients, and it's a 3-part question, and it's what I don't like, what I really like, and what I'm curious about. And it helps start a conversation around increased sexuality and sex and intimacy, emotional, erotic within the partnership.
Wow. I love that. I love that because, it's we all ask questions on various topics, like even in corporate, like what should I start, stop, and keep doing, right? Like in corporate, that would be something that I would ask, my team about me, or if 360 feedback, but we don't even think potentially about asking that about our sex lives or about our intimacy or pleasure.
That's right. And I call it the traffic light exercise.
Oh.
And I work with all my clients on this in partnership is, what are my red lights? What are my green lights? And what are my yellow curiosities?
I love it.
So, yep. And it's a very fruitful conversation. And sometimes partners are just so surprised by the other person.
I love it. I love it. Before we kind of wrap up, is there anything that you kind of wanted to share with the audience listening today?
I think ultimately is that normalizing pleasure is probably one of the most important things and gifts you can give yourself. Because to your point about self-care and, owning your own health, sex and sexuality and emotional intimacy and erotic intimacy, it's all part of your holistic health plan.
I love that. It's part of your holistic health plan, people. It's important. So, Rachael, this has been such a powerful conversation. I love how you reframe libido as a true health marker and reminded us that pleasure is something we all need to take responsibility for. But before we let you go, where can our listeners find you, connect with your work, learn more about your practice?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So they can find me on my website, which is rglifecoach, all one word, .com. And also Instagram, my last name, Goodman, GOODMAN _ Rach, RACH. And you can find me on Instagram with that handle.
I love that. So that'll be in the show notes. And to everyone listening, if this episode sparks something for you, share it with a friend, rate us 5 stars, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're ready to prioritize your health in every sense of the word, check us out at healthcollective.us or follow us on Instagram at healthcollective_USA. Thank you so much for tuning into the Healthy Pod. Until next time, remember, health isn't just about how you look or what you eat. It's also about how alive and connected you feel. Thanks, everyone.